Welcome to the Get Fit Guys quick and dirty tips to get moving and shape up. My name is Brock Armstrong and I am the Get Fit Guy. Alright, on with the show. Wave after wave of studies and papers, articles, and hypotheses that explore the links between mental and physical fitness are emerging from labs and universities all over the world. And I think all of this research will give us even more motivation to go out there and get fit. And that's what we're going to dig into today. You've probably heard people say something along the lines of, your brain is like a muscle. That comparison certainly does support the brain training industry, and by that I mean school, and it keeps millions of youth all around the world sitting in desks, doing math problems, writing essays, and dissecting unsuspecting amphibians. But is that statement true? Well, interestingly, the brain as a muscle comparison is not all that accurate. If you want to build your glutes, well, you have to flex your glutes. But when it comes to your brain, a more coincidental approach is actually more accurate. Getting busy working your glutes will actually directly benefit your gray matter. Yes, exercising your butt will make you smarter. Exercise affects the brain in many ways. It increases heart rate, which pumps more oxygen to the brain. It aids the release of hormones, which provide an excellent environment for the growth of brain cells. Exercise also promotes brain plasticity by stimulating growth of new connections between cells in many important cortical areas of the brain. Now, research from the UCLA even demonstrated that exercise increased growth factors in the brain, which makes it easier for the brain to grow new neuronal connections. Now, from a more feel-good perspective, the same antidepressant-like effects that are associated with the runner's high have been correlated with a drop in stress hormone, and a new study from Stockholm showed that the antidepressant effect of running was also associated with more cell growth in the hippocampus, which is an area of the brain responsible for learning and memory. The study went as far as to say, and I quote, "Thus, suppression of cell proliferation in the hippocampus could constitute one of the mechanisms that underlie depression, and physical activity might be an effective antidepressant." All right, let's get into some hard examples here. Scientists are continuing to show that everything from the runner's high to the yogi's tranquility can have profound effects on the brain. So here are a few examples of how that works. And the first one is that exercise boosts memory. The part of the brain that responds strongly to aerobic exercise is called the hippocampus. And since the hippocampus is at the core of the brain's learning and memory systems, this finding partly explains the memory-boosting effects of improved cardiovascular fitness. And the second example is exercise increases concentration. Exercise can actually help you focus and stay on task longer. During a study in Holland, they interspersed lectures with 20-minute-long aerobic-style workouts and found that it improved attention spans of the students. Then, in a large randomized control study in the US, they looked at the effects of daily sports classes which spanned the entire school year. The students got fitter, but they also became better at multitasking, ignoring distractions, and processing complex information. And my third example is that exercise improves mental health. We've all heard of, or maybe experienced, the runner's high, that feeling of happiness and clarity that often follows exercise. Well, it is real. It has even been observed in mice, and evidence points to a pleasurable and pain-killing firing of what is called the endocannabinoid system, which is also known as the psychoactive receptor for cannabis. Science is also increasingly backing the yogi's claim of the relaxation response. A study back in 2012 titled "Stress Reduction Correlates with Structural Changes in the Amygdala" put participants through 8 weeks of daily yoga and meditation practice, and they concluded, and I quote, "Participants reported significantly reduced perceived stress, and reductions in perceived stress correlated positively with decreases in right basolateral amygdala gray matter density. And another study showing exercise as a way to overcome depression is the 2013 meta-analysis, which reported that exercise, including aerobics and heavy lifting, was moderately effective in treating depressive symptoms. Of particular note is that the researchers stated that exercise seemed as effective as antidepressant drugs and psychological treatments. And my fourth example of how exercise can help your brain is that exercise enhances creativity. Creative types through the ages have claimed that walking aided their creative process, and lately, psychologists gave that idea empirical support. A 2014 paper titled "Give Your Ideas Some Legs: The Positive Effect of Walking on Creative Thinking" showed that walking, either on a treadmill or around Stanford's leafy campus, boosted creative thinking. But interestingly, it didn't help convergent thinking, and that is generally defined as the ability to give the correct answer to standard questions that do not require any significant creativity. And my fifth example is that exercise slows cognitive decline. To get this benefits, workouts don't even have to be extreme. Once again, we find that 30 to 45 minutes of brisk walking 3 times a week can help fend off the mental wear and tear and delay the onset of dementia. So once again, walking for the win. And if walking isn't your jam, well then twice weekly sessions of weightlifting can have a visible neurological impact. Or maybe how about some dancing? Studies show that dancing may also be restorative. Just 1 hour of dance a week for 6 months boosted elderly individuals' cognitive well-being. All right, back to our examples of how exercise can help your brain, and we're at number 6, which is exercise improves circulation. Because exercise usually increases your heart rate, it helps deliver more oxygen and glucose to your brain, which stimulates the brain's synapses by preserving the number of acetylcholine receptors that are found at the junction of muscles and nerves. Now, this has been observed in the fact that active people have more of those receptors in their brains than inactive people do. Which leads me to number 7, which is exercise aids learning and memory. Even moderate physical exercise, such as our old friend going for a walk, can actually boost memory functions, learning, and the ability for abstract reasoning. It's not completely understood how this works, but improved oxygenation and nutrition for the brain are likely the major factors. And our 8th example is that exercise builds more brain cells. Up until 1999, the brain was actually thought to be complete at birth and not capable of actually growing new brain cells. But a Salk Institute study showed that the adult human brain is capable of producing new cells through a thing called neurogenesis. Although we don't understand how, the one thing that is sure is that physical exercise helps build brains. The theory is that exercise stimulates the production of a very aptly named brain protein called noggin, and this protein initiates the production of neurogenesis and stem cells. And our final example of how exercise helps the brain is that exercise prevents disease. Now, according to the National Institute of Health, being physically active may help to delay or even prevent the decline of cognitive functions associated with aging. People who stay seated are twice as likely as people who bust a move to develop diseases like Alzheimer's. Okay, that's the end of my list, but there are tons and tons more examples of how exercise helps the brain. And as the saying goes, well, you know something is legit when mainstream media gets in on the action, right? Well, back in 2017, CNN published an article called 3 Ways That Exercise Benefits Your Brain. And in that article, they highlighted these 3 beneficial factors of exercise. Number 1, it boosts your mental fitness. Number 2, it banishes stress for good. And number 3, it helps you age with grace. So let's look at what they said about each one of those. In the article, they laid out Boost Your Mental Fitness like this. There are about 86 billion neurons in your head, all designed to give orders to the rest of your body with the help of chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. Now, these neurotransmitters regulate everything in the body, from mood to sleep to memory and even hunger. Studies show that low levels of 2 of these neurotransmitters in particular, called glutamate and gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, often lead to depression. But according to a study in the Journal of Neuroscience, moderate exercise can increase these levels, which can result in increased resilience and capacity to respond to mental challenges. And all of this is directly connected to a concept known as mental fitness, which sounds pretty darn good to me. Now, in terms of the second item on CNN's list, banishing stress for good, the article said that when you're stressed out, your brain secretes the fight or flight stress hormone that's called cortisol. Now, cortisol is very helpful if you are getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you need to run for the hills. But if you're sitting quietly at your desk with no tigers in sight and your cortisol levels are still elevated, it can cause problems like heart disease, diabetes, and hypertension. Now, the solution for this appears to be hitting the track or pumping some iron or even punching the heck out of a heavy bag. All of these activities are thought of as something called controlled stress, which actually sharpens your brain's stress response and helps you turn stress off and on at more appropriate times. And finally, CNN addressed their third point of aging with grace by pointing out that older adults who exercise actually have larger brain volumes than those who don't. And that's according to a 2006 University of Illinois study. And in that study, sedentary volunteers aged 60 through 79 participated in a 6-month exercise program that met 3 times per week. Now, half of the volunteers did aerobic exercise, such as walking, yes, again with the walking, and the other half did stretching and toning exercises. And at the conclusion of the study, the aerobic exercise group showed greater increases in brain volume when compared to the participants who did the toning and stretching exercises. Now, the icing on the cake is that the hippocampus, which is associated with memory and learning, which usually shrinks with age, was actually larger in the people who were getting down with them bad selves. Now, this is unlikely to actually make you smarter, but it will certainly help you to remember the important stuff. And if you've ever watched an aging loved one start to forget more and more of their former life and their family, well, you'll know that this is an excellent reason to get fit, starting right now. All right, to wrap things up, let's talk about how this works. Now, researchers are still working on the why and the how, and they're trying to determine the critical factors that make exercise so good for the brain, but the focus seems to be on these factors: increased blood flow to the brain, surges in growth hormones, and a massive expansion of the brain's network of blood vessels. Neuroscientists have known since that 1999 study that brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, is released during aerobic exercise, and that stimulates neurogenesis, which is the growth of new neurons. But more recently, scientists have honed in on an exercise-activated hormone called irisin. And I gotta say, if you need one more reason to get out there and get fit, you can add irisin to your list. In 2012, scientists discovered that irisin has the ability to help maintain healthy body weight, improve cognition, and slow the aging process. Now that is a trifecta that I can get on board with. So, after listing all of these factors, we can clearly see the cognitive benefits are nearly as impressive as the physical benefits when it comes to exercise. This also reminds us that our brains and our bodies do not operate in isolation and independent of each other. What we do with our body and what we put in our body benefits or harms your mental faculties as much as it adds and subtracts girth from your biceps or your ability to run a 10-minute mile. Being sedentary all day, every day, is as dangerous for your waistline as it is for your mind. So, don't wait. Find an activity and do it. Or, as we have learned again and again, just go for a walk. Now, for more information on your brain and tips to get your mind and your body good and fit and join in the smarty pants conversations, you can find me at facebook.com/getfitguy or twitter.com/getfitguy or my own website, brockarmstrong.com. Now, my name is Brock Armstrong and I am the Get Fit Guy, asking you, what are you going to do for your brain today?